Gators Breakdown episode 144 is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SCC. And joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown from Swamp 24/7, 24 Sports Florida Gators site is Blake Alderman. You can find Blake on Twitter at Blake_Alderman, and all his work on Swamp 24/7. Blake, I got an important question to ask you. How much food did you get to eat at the Gator Grill-Out? Did you get pied in the face? And were you the last one standing in Fortnite?
Definitely yes on Fortnite. Dropped it tilted. Actually didn't get any food. That was the one thing that I was probably the most sad about throughout the day, because not only did I have to see the food, smell the food, I had to watch everybody else eat the food, see pictures of the food. So was definitely pretty salty about that, because I was definitely starving on my way home when I grabbed some terrible thing on the way home.
All because you had to work and go home and write, right?
Pretty much, I was just that urgent and dedicated. So,
So I can't believe you didn't take part in pieing people in the face, I guess.
I'm a little jealous of that too. I'm not going to lie.
I will ask who you wanted to pie in the face.
I don't know. I don't know if they had enough pies for that.
But it looks like it was a good time had by all there.
Yeah, it looked overall, from talking with the kids and, kind of getting their feel of recruits there, it seemed like the overall consensus was that it wasn't a come to visit, we'll tour you around, kind of the same old you could really get at any visit. These guys were more about, bringing your family, creating that family atmosphere, just kind of kick your feet up and come hang out and, come see what Florida's about, get a bond with the coaches, and not necessarily have to hear a sales pitch or anything like that. So, I think the kids kind of like that. Overall, the feedback out of that seemed positive from the recruits that were there. And, I think Florida made a good impression on some of these kids.
That sounds good. That did definitely seem to be the theme. It's just a laid back attitude. It really was a cookout, a grill out, however you want to term it for Florida. But it was definitely like you were in your backyard with your own family, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of kids brought, almost their whole family, like not just mom and dad, like grandma, cousins, aunts and uncles. There was some of these kids brought quite a bit of their family. So, it really was like that family-like atmosphere. There was, little games, like you said, the pie eating contest, limbo. They had a big water balloon fight out there with the coaches and some of the current players. Games, cornhole, things like that were set up. And, they had like a snow cone truck there that was, for some of the smaller kids there. So, there was really a lot of things that I had one of the kids that mentioned it was almost kind of like a fair, so I think that a lot of kids really like that, a lot of family members like that. And, I think that it was, kind of good time for some of these, kids and especially family members, because this is such a family decision for some of these kids. So I think that might've been the most important thing, if not anything.
Absolutely. So before we dive into specifics with certain players and stuff, help those guys out with Blake and them guys. You can go join Swamp 24/7. It's the best site for Gators coverage out there. You can get Blake's recruiting thoughts and updates there, along with all other Gator sports coverage from our friend Thomas Goldcamp, who joins us here on Gators Breakdown every now and then, and Luke Stampini as well over at Swamp 24/7. And remember, you can find Gators Breakdown on news4jacks.com/Gators Breakdown. There you will find Gators Breakdown episodes, as well as articles from the News for Jack sports team. That's news4jacks.com/Gators Breakdown. Also, catch the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and here live on YouTube. You can go back and watch the video version. I know a lot of you check that out after the fact as well. So follow the Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook at Gators Breakdown. And hey, look, go leave us a review on iTunes. Please rate and review the show there. Subscribe to the podcast. It really helps us out there on Gators Breakdown. So Blake, we'll dive into the specifics of some of these players. I know there are a few targets that Florida really impressed with. Florida really impressed at the Grill-Out. Who did Florida help themselves with the most there on Saturday?
I think that the three names that immediately jump out to me is probably tight end Jaleel Billingsley is probably the number one that I think Florida really made an impression with. This was his first time on campus. He brought mom and dad, and you could really tell that Larry Scott has this guy really high on his wish list. This was a guy that Larry Scott didn't venture very far from almost the entire day, at the cookout event. showing the family around on their little golf carts, kind of giving them a tour. Where it was, the family and Jaleel and a staffer driving one, and then behind here comes Larry Scott, personally driving the mom around and showing her, and them laughing, and it just seemed like they really did hit it off. So I think that was probably the one kid that Florida made probably the biggest impression on. Heading into it, had mentioned Illinois and Florida were kind of battling it out. Had been seen to be trending more towards Illinois, staying close to home. That's where he's from, but. Following this visit, Florida's, the top school right there. He said that he even thought about pulling the trigger and committing on the visit. He's obviously returned home from there, but, it seems like Florida continues to trend there more and more. And he seems to me possibly maybe moving up a timeline. He had wanted to maybe have a commitment sometime around the end of the summer, but I think Florida's done a good job that they could be something to watch here, maybe coming up in the next, I don't know, maybe a couple days, week, we'll see how the things go out there. But, I think that Florida seems to have a lot of momentum in this recruitment. Another guy, Lloyd Summerall, the 4-star kind of weak side hybrid rush defensive end. Florida's really impressed this guy starting all the way back to April. He took his first visit there. He got a chance to hang out with Todd Grantham and Mullen and a couple of these other coaches. And they really kind of sold him on this scheme fit of fitting into that 3-4 as that stand-up hybrid type of rusher. He had kind of been seen more as an in-state battle, the big three kind of battle there. But with Florida really running a defense that kind of better suits what he thinks is the best fit for him in the NFL, I think it has Florida trending, coming back, bringing mom and family and, all these other guys that were part of his family there, getting closer to the staff. They seem to be more and more on board. I don't think this is a recruitment that maybe not like Billingsley where you could see sort of a quick turnaround. Lloyd seems to be saying more towards later in the fall. I start to maybe think that he's a guy that could move it up depending how many more visits he gets under his belt as we kind of continue here through the summer. But either way, I think Florida might be the leader in the clubhouse here. Another one, 4-star defensive end Nathan Pickering out of Mississippi. Relationship goes all the way back with Mullen, all the way back to his freshman year. Was kind of a frequent visitor to Mississippi State, obviously getting a chance to bond with Mullen and a lot of other staff members there. That relationship has not really changed since he's been to Gainesville, since Mullen has been to Gainesville. And Pickering has made 2 visits this offseason, and this is an 8-hour drive that he's made twice now so that he can come in and make that visit and show effort there. So, Florida seems to be another guy that's trending a lot there. If this guy, I wouldn't say he's the upper crust of the recruiting board overall, regardless of position. This is a guy that Florida wants badly. They like how he could play some tackle, he could play some end, so he's a versatile guy that they're looking to really plug in there now. Those are probably the 3 that really jump out the most as guys that Florida really impressed. Just kind of looking through my own visitor list there, but those are probably the ones that stick out the most from the guys that did show up there.
Yeah, Summerall, it was good to get him back on campus, and I know there were a lot of positive vibes from the first time he was on campus, and
Sure.
to keep hearing his name brought up and the interest from his side, I really like that. Also, Pickering out of Mississippi, as you said, if Mullen can continue that relationship and get one of the bigs out of Mississippi, one of the top players there, I think that really speaks when all other schools, whether he stays in state, you can't really blame kids for staying in state. You don't want to see. Mullen, with the relationship he has with Mississippi kids, you would hate to see him go to another out-of-state school. If he's going out of state, you would hope that would be Florida.
Definitely. And, he seems to be making that effort to come back. He came down with another recruit out of Mississippi, Dennis Jackson, a 4-star wide receiver. And at one point when we were interviewing Nathan after his visit, he rode down with Dennis's family. And at one point they weren't sure that they were going to make it. And Nathan was, calling him on the phone. Come on, man, we got to make it. Trust me. Florida's a place you want to visit. So I think that spoke more than anything that Nathan had to say during that interview was that he was, kind of on his boy's back about, come on, man, we got to get down there. We got to see this place. Trust me. So I think it shows that Florida's really got some momentum there.
Yeah. And the thing about Billingsley, Blake, and I think all we really have to say is Alabama offered today.
Definitely. That was one that I think in a little while people were like, what's going on? We'll see what's happening. Of course, there's talk of it maybe moving up a timeline, and here we go. But, I don't think there's going to be much change there. But, it's definitely nice to see that Alabama is throwing in an offer. It's kind of like what do you call it? Like the measuring stick of recruits for some of these guys is, is Alabama offered? Yeah, there we go. So.
The seal of approval. There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Blake, 4-star offensive lineman Will Putnam had good things to say about the event as well, and good things to say about Florida, but he comes from the not so friendly to the Gators plant high. But it really looks like that Florida's done a good job here of getting his interest.
Definitely. This is a guy that, he's an academic kid, so there's some sway in there. He's an in-state kid that's gotten on campus twice now. He's pretty close with Hevesy. Seems kind of like he comes from a military family, so he's a guy that's not only has moved around a lot and doesn't really have any preference of going back to where he's grown up from, staying in Florida. So I think he's a kid that is, genuinely open with his recruitment. But again, that military background, Hevesy has been kind of a guy that, I don't want to say drill instructor, but, he's runs his practice like that. He's a, kind of a no BS guy. And I think that Putnam likes that aspect about that because it kind of reminds him something that he is familiar with. So, I think that Florida is definitely in it. I think that maybe even some schools in the Midwest, this is a guy that doesn't really seem to have any kind of ties anywhere because he has moved around a lot. He mentioned some time in Hawaii where he lived at one point. He's obviously in Florida now, out in the Midwest. I believe he's from Illinois or Iowa, somewhere, something like that. So, he's a genuinely open kid, I think, with his recruitment, but he is going to start narrowing things down. Georgia visits were mentioned. I believe he's going to be at Auburn on June 2nd. So, I think he really is doing his due diligence, but I do think that Florida having 2 visits there, they're definitely in it. And, they're just going to have to keep, kind of plugging away and chipping away. And obviously getting him back on campus again would be big.
All right, Blake, let's go back big picture a little bit. And you've seen it on the SWAP 24/7 message board and all over social media as well. But there seems to be 2 factions of the fan base right now when it comes to state of recruiting right now under Dan Mullen. He had a good close on his first signing period, but some are worried about where the 2019 class stands right now in late May. Gators are 23rd in recruiting right now in 24/7 Sports with 8 commits, 6 3-stars, 2 4-stars, 10th in the SEC. In-state schools, Florida State and Miami, are also currently in the top 10 in recruiting. So I certainly get the worry from some of the fan base when it looks like Florida is looking, at maybe falling behind on the trail. But many point out, and of course it's still May, there's plenty of time left for Mullen to bring in quality players and bolster the class and climb the rankings. So, Blake, how do you assess the recruiting as we head into the summer months? And Bill Sykes and I talked, and this is something he'd like for you to extend on. If players are looking for results on the field, what are they wanting to see from Dan Mullen that he didn't show at Mississippi State already?
I think it's not necessarily something he hasn't shown at Mississippi State. I think kids in general just kind of want to see where Florida is going to go from there. Having a bad season there, new coach, who's kind of preaching a new vibe and new things there. So I think kids really just kind of want to see how things translate on the field. Do I think that goes hand in hand with recruiting? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think it's hard to say, but it's kind of go back to that question of, the state of recruiting, if you want to call it that. I do think that, I understand where fans come from because they're seeing other schools get kids and, it's kind of one of those things, well, look where our rivals are, all that. I understand that. But I think for me, from a judging where your class is kind of deal, I think you always kind of have to see where you're at the end of summer. I think that that's kind of my measuring stick where I'm kind of waiting to see where things are and kind of give my own opinion from there. Because I think around the end of summer, when you have that rush of guys that make their decision before the season or, have taken some of these, June official visits and kind of want to have a quick decision turning around there, I think that's where you see where your nucleus of your class is at, is right there at the end of summer, kind of heading the season. Because when the season starts up, some of these kids do kind of tend to go underground. They focus on their own season, their senior season, school starting up. They may pick some official visits here and there and kind of maybe gear towards a later decision in the fall. So for me, I think that you have to gauge where things are at near the end of summer, kind of see where things are coming up with, these camps. Some kids will start setting some decision dates and kind of figuring things out on their own. And I think that's kind of where Florida's at now, is they're kind of have used this spring to kind of set up and maybe make a run sometime there in the summer, heading into right before that dead period that starts the end of June.
Yeah, like I said, I certainly get both sides of it, but I'm kind of, holding that bay as well right now, just because you do hear so much good coming out of these visits. And I know a lot of fans are tired of hearing the energy's there, and it looks Florida feels so much better compared, when you were talking to recruits right now compared to recruits there, they say the energy's there, everything looks better at Florida, but still none of the big names have really come in yet. So I get that worry, but there is still a little bit of time.
Sure. A lot of big name guys, they aren't in a hurry to make a decision. A lot of the bigger guys, they want to take all their visits, that they like being recruited. That's even kind of a thing with not even kids that are, 5-star recruits, or even, some kids like to be recruited. They like to be talking to coaches. They like to take visits, so I think that a lot of kids in general, they like it until it starts to get near the end of summer and they realize that the season's coming and it's time to get serious. So, I think that's where, Florida seems to be, like you said, kids are mentioning, the vibe on these visits. It seems like Florida kind of needs that one stone to fall, and, maybe they can have a couple other guys fall in line. And, it seems that's kind of what, at least it seems like from, kind of where they're at with, some of these guys like Micah Pittman, Trey Sanders, these are guys that are looking to make a decision end of summer, into the fall there. So, I think Florida could kind of set themselves up for a late run sometime in the summer with how their decision dates are setting up with some of these guys. But, it's kind of what we'll see now. And, with this being Mullen's first full class, I am still kind of, feeling these guys out and doing some research on my own. So that's why I'm kind of waiting until the end of summer to see where that nucleus is at and see kind of where, even before I put my own opinion in, because like I said, this is their first full cycle with kids. So we're kind of still, the jury's still out for me at least.
Gotcha. Blake, so some of the big targets didn't get to show for various reasons to the Grill-Out. Trey Sanders, Kyer Elam, they had events in their lives going, in their own lives going on at different times that weren't able to attend. And then you had Tyreek Stevenson, who chose to visit Georgia instead. How could some of those be construed to Gator fans who targets that didn't show, understandably for some, and you may be disappointed in what Stevenson did by visiting Georgia?
I think of those, Stevenson was the only one that was realistically expected. Kyer Elam had his spring game that weekend, and actually Billy Gonzalez wasn't at the cookout. He was, on the sidelines watching him in his spring game, and also watched Akeem Dent down there in South Florida too. So, Florida still made that effort to go and come watch Elam. You couldn't see us, but we'll come see you kind of deal. Trey Sanders was another one that wasn't expected. He was going to stay home. He had said he was staying home, getting ready to study for finals. So, Stevenson's the one that, it does burn to have a guy that was expected on campus decide to go to Georgia. So, but I do expect that Stevenson is going to be a guy that's going to continue to carry his recruitment probably all the way up to the February signing day. I think there's going to be quite a bit twists and turns. I expect that recruitment to be a pretty wild one as we head into the fall. But, Georgia does, I think it does say something that he chose to visit Georgia. And I think it shows that Georgia is a legitimate player in this recruitment. Everyone kind of figured it was a Florida-Miami battle. I believe that was his fourth visit to Athens. And, obviously choosing to go there instead of Florida, I think shows that, the Bulldogs are a serious contender in here and they should be watched.
Yeah, Kirby recruits that South Florida area pretty well. So I'd be interested to see how he pulls that out there. As you said, but hey, look, this is big boy recruiting now, though.
Sure. And that's like I said, big boy recruiting, there's twists and turns, and, that people who follow recruiting, they know too that, there are twists and turns anyways, but some of these, heavy hitters like Florida's chasing after, this isn't easy, low hanging fruit recruitments that, are kind of layups. These are, legitimate guys Florida's going after. And it's going to be I'm sure there's going to be a lot of battles for them as they continue to go through here. So I'm sure this won't be the only one we talk about that gets weird.
Yeah, that's the way it should be as well. So, Blake, this comes from my co-host, Will Miles. He was just going back to this time last year. We knew there was a thought that Jim McElwain was feeling some heat from the fan base as far as recruiting goes. We know there was some sense of urgency there because he had the coaching changes, and that really helped on the recruiting trail. Things started to happen. They had a big Friday Night Lights camp. Since this is Mullen's first season, is there a sense of urgency from the get-go on the trail? I think it's given from the sense of urgency that he had for the 2018 class because, he just got hired. You had early signing day. That was new. You're getting guys ready for that. But do you sense a sense of urgency for 2019 so far?
I do. And I think it's because of this new month-long recruiting dead period that's going to start from June 25th all the way to July 25th. So I think that there does make some sort of urgency there because you're going to lose almost, or actually is a full month of recruiting there that, people are not really used to because it is sort of kind of a new dead period there. At least it's, fairly new. So, I think that's where you're going to see Florida kind of put that emphasis towards those early June official visits for some of these guys. They have a couple guys that are expected in the first weekend of June there on the 1st and another one that's going to be in there the following weekend. And I'm sure that list will continue to kind of grow. They obviously have a lot of their summer camps, 7-on-7. I believe there's a quarterback camp. And obviously Friday Night Lights will be there right after that dead period ends in July. So I think you're going to see some urgency like I said, where your nucleus is built there. And I think you're seeing some urgency now because there is, about a month left of, them on the spring, or excuse me, there's a couple weeks left of them on the spring recruiting trail as they continue to do that. Then obviously you turn into your summer camp. So I think the urgency is there because, you want to kind of try to close out strong and carry that momentum into the season. So I think that that's where you see the urgency now. But overall, recruiting wise, I think there is some urgency there because, I think that Mullen knows that Florida fans, what they expect of recruiting. So I think that there's going to be some urgency there just because of that. But I think more so, you're going to see them really, try to get some of these guys on board and put some urgency towards, trying to get some of these stones to fall and kind of, close things out and carry that momentum. So I do think you'll see some, some things start to pick up now.
Good deal. Good deal. Blake, a little fun here, a little fun question before we get into some listener tweets that were sent in. So we see all these recruits take photos in many of the uniform combinations Florida has. So this is a simple question. What's your favorite Gator uniform combination?
All whites. It's always the all whites.
There we go. Me too.
The Stormtroopers.
Yeah. If people are watching the YouTube version, they can see the white helmet behind me too. That's how much I liked it. I had to get it set up for a background in the podcast.
Plus, too, isn't that the thing too that when the recruits wear the all white, those are the ones that are coming too. So
that's the. I'm
sure that's the overwhelming. That's probably the overwhelming fan favorite.
I think so. I think so too.
I didn't really go too off the cusp with my answer. I feel kind of lame now. I guess I should say blue and white now.
Maybe I don't know.
That's number 2. We'll say that.
Yeah, I like the white helmet though. Either way,
I saw that some of the recruits now that they're actually had where it was Gators on both sides.
Yeah,
not just the double. That was the thing I never liked about the white helmets was the 2 different decals.
Yeah, that didn't bother me so much, but I know there's a lot of fans that don't like even the new slanted F. But I'm a big slanted F logo fan, so hopefully they put that on both sides and they can wear both of them.
I'm fine with either way as long as it's one uniform thing. Just like make up your mind.
You're right. I think that does seem to be that's what irked fans a lot. Was the double logo that did rub some fans the wrong way. I
don't blame them.
All right. All right. So let's get into some listener questions, Blake. That was sent our way. Some listeners wanted to ask you some questions. So remember, guys, you can find Blake and his articles at Swamp 24/7 on 24/7 Sports Network. And this one comes from Kay Goodman. She goes, "How many cornerbacks do you see as a take, and whom?"
I think that there's some guys that Florida obviously signing one true corner in Trey Dean last year. I think they're looking to add some depth there. So a couple of guys that really kind of jumped out from that question was Kyer Elam. Obviously, the family ties there, and Florida seems to be really in there. He seems now to be wanting to take his recruitment later into the process, but I think Florida is the team to beat now as we kind of wait and see how things go. Chris Steele, a 4-star outside of California, was just on campus last weekend. Had been kind of heavily presumed to stick and stay close to home out of USC, but I think Florida made some real progress on that visit. Dad knows Ron English all the way back to his West Coast ties, and they were recruiting him at Mississippi State. Charlton Warren offered him at Tennessee, so I think Florida made some big noise there, and he's a guy that they like a lot. Derek Stingley, he'll be there on June 1st weekend for an official visit out of Louisiana. He's the 5-star cornerback. He was last on Florida's campus for the spring game. I think LSU is tough to beat there. He's a Baton Rouge kid. I think they're going to be tough to beat in the end. But, Florida does seem to probably be the team that is, I would say, the most realistic number 2. Texas was another official visit, but I kind of like Florida's chances a little bit better for now there, kind of going against LSU. But again, I think the Tigers are going to be tough to beat. Chester Kimbrough, another guy out of Louisiana, is another guy that Florida really likes a lot. He named Florida his leader after his spring game visit too. And he's another guy that has, kind of been the pitch of, hey, you and Derek Stingley can come in and, kind of be that Marco Wilson and CJ Henderson duo, but only from Louisiana. So I think that that's another guy that they like a lot too. And then obviously Tyreek Stevenson, who we talked about earlier. I think he's a guy that could play corner, safety, nickel. They like that versatility, but he's listed as a corner. I think he would prefer to be known as a corner, but knows that he can be versatile there and is okay with kind of seeing the field there. So those are the names that really jump out the most that what I would say would be kind of the upper crust, corners that Florida's kind of in the mix for right now.
Gotcha. We'll move on to our next one from Christopher Yanes. Do you think we will see some 2020 commitments in the coming months to start getting ahead for the next cycle?
I think you can. I think it's kind of hard to say because a lot of these 2020 guys, I think the ones that would probably be the most realistic to expect are the ones that are going to come in and camp and, could maybe jump on an offer right then and there or, kind of, get the vibe from the coaching staff. The one that I would say maybe jumps out the most that, just kind of just off the top of my head is Anthony Richardson, the quarterback out of Gainesville, who plans to come camp at Florida. Grew up obviously there in Gainesville, so I think that that's the one that kind of jumps out the most to me, that at least one to follow, because he does say that he's planning on, taking, more camps. He's, planning to kind of go around and you throw for a couple coaches. I guess you could see maybe what an offer sheet looks like after the summer. But, I do think that was one, at least, that I came away talking with him Saturday thinking that Florida probably was the team to beat, just from him having so, much comfortability there with the staff. But I think it's kind of hard to say, because Florida, they seem to have thrown out a lot of 2020 offers, and, they seem to kind of, wanting a lot of these guys to come camp. And I think this summer and, having guys come in and, see what they're made of, I think will kind of help formalize that 2020 board.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because, and we saw it too with Mullen. I guess was January, February, they kind of casted a whole wide net, and you started throwing offers out even to 2019 guys. So as you're saying, we're seeing that a lot with 2020 guys now too, is casting that wide net and see, I guess, just trying to see who you can reel in easily to begin with.
Sure. Offer the ballers and everyone in between and see how it kind of shakes out seems to be the plan, at least from looking at it. Offered a 5-star outside linebacker guy from Seattle from Washington, at least today. So, they're just kind of throwing out offers and seeing what sticks, and they're trying to recruit on a national brand. So I think that right now it's just kind of, oh, well, you've got 5 stars, 4 stars, oh yeah, definitely got a Florida offer.
All right. From Jay Myers, 1515. Who were Mullen's top 3 recruits for 2019?
I would say Tyreek.
It may not be Mullins, I guess, but if you had to guess.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Mullen didn't, give me this 4-1-1 before I jumped on here, but I would think that 3 guys that would definitely be in the mix for that. Tyreek Stevenson, with his versatility, like I said, he's a big time Florida target in the defensive backfield. They want to get this guy back in the commitment class really bad. Nathan Pickering. This is a guy that's known Mullen since his freshman year. He's a position where he could, kind of move around the defensive line. They have a great shot with him coming off of his couple visits there. He's definitely up there on the board. Trey Sanders, 5-star, nation's #1 running back. That a guy like that, Mullen would really like to break this, I guess if you want to call it, curse of, not having a 5-star in the class the last couple of years. And, this is a guy that Florida's, again, in great shape for. And, they really want this guy bad.
Yeah, another one to throw in about that. He's an IMG kid.
Yeah, exactly. You got to break. That's 2 curses he's trying to break now. So,
yeah. And Bahan Style sends, all seems quiet on the Rambo Hunter Jr. front after it looked like he was trending our way. Did something happen?
No, I just think that this is what everyone expected his recruitment to look like. He's an impressionable kid. Florida's obviously in great shape there. He's been there a billion times on campus. But, this is a guy that has, even when he was visiting Florida consistently, was still telling reporters that Georgia leads, was still, fielding top 10s, top 12s, whatever. So I think he's a kid that's genuinely going to take his recruitment deep. I think Florida is definitely probably the team to beat right now. Georgia's obviously in there, Penn State, Alabama. We'll see what happens, because he was committed to Miami and has a relationship with Coach Cool, who's now up there in Tuscaloosa. So I think that he's, Florida's to lose still, but they just need to continue to get him back on campus, because this is a kid that's going to have twists and turns, and it's going to be another weird recruitment that I think is going to, if the longer it carries out, the weirder it's going to get. And I think that Florida's definitely in there, but they just have to just kind of continue what they're doing.
And our last listener question comes from Jab 2375. What's our biggest issue on the trail right now? We kind of hit on that maybe just because some recruits are waiting for what they see on the field, but is there anything else maybe hanging out there, Blake?
I think just closing, just kind of continue to close these guys down. I think that's the biggest thing. That's what fans want to see. They want to see some of these guys that are leaning to Florida actually close it down and, get these guys to jump on board. And I think you're going to see them kind of start pressing for commits, as, with a dead period coming, all these things we mentioned earlier, wanting that solid nucleus there. So I think you're going to see them kind of start getting that killer instinct in the next month or so.
Good deal, Blake. That's all I have for you. What you guys got coming up on Swamp 24/7?
Just kind of continuing. I'll finish up the last little bit of my, coverage from the campers that were there this past week, and I'll finish my last story on a 2020 kid tonight. Continuing to follow coaches as they continue to, visit some of these spring games. Florida will actually have they'll be seeing a kid out in New York tomorrow. Christian Robinson will be out there checking out recruits and stuff. So these guys are still hitting the recruiting trail. Only a couple more visits left. They've hit a lot of big targets already. And, then it's going to be kind of waiting to June, whenever they're going to start, these official visits. They'll have a big official visit weekend the June 1st weekend, and I believe June 2nd is their first weekend camp. So things are never quiet on Swamp 24/7.
Absolutely. And Blake, do we know for sure about Friday Night Lights? We know that's going to be probably late July if they're happening, but is
Yeah,
it?
it will be. Sorry, it will be July 27th, I believe. It'll be right there. The dead period will
Yeah.
end the 25th, and
Yeah.
it will be that Friday right after. So July 27th.
Okay. Okay. So
I don't know if it'll be how it was when McElwain, where they had the
yeah.
sensational softball. I don't know the setup there, but I know
Yeah.
that that's the be the day for Friday Night Lights.
I mean, coming off that dead period and fall camp starting soon, it's going to be nuts around the nation for these kids figuring out where they want to go that
And
weekend.
also, it'll be interesting because Paradise Camp at Miami will be that same one. So there'll be a lot of common guys on the list, I believe, just like last year. So it's going to be a big recruiting weekend, and you're going to see a lot of these guys kind of getting trying to battle for the same guys to get on campus. So I think like we said, when things start to kind of die down there heading into the fall, this is the staff's last chance. So they're going to really look to make some impressions and get these guys on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, Blake, thank you so much for sharing your recruiting knowledge for the Gators, and glad you had a good time at the cookouts, and we'll definitely have you back on here at Gators Breakdown.
Yeah, man, anytime. I'm looking for ribs anywhere, ribs, Fortnite. So anything you've got, let me know.
All right, Blake, man, thank you so much.
Anytime. Thanks.
All right. Blake Alderman from Swamp 24/7 joining us here. Guys, go to that website, 24/7 Sports Network. Those guys do a good job. But that site I've been a member of for a long time. Enjoy letting them share my podcast on there. Just can't thank them enough for all the interaction that we have here. A couple more things I wanted to hit on before we wrap up this episode of Gators Breakdown. Van Jefferson update, what it holds for him. Coming up for the SEC spring meetings next week in Florida, also signing a deal with South Florida and playing a few games against the Bulls of South Florida. So, of course, I mentioned Van Jefferson, and a lot of people were wondering what the holdup has been. Why haven't we heard anything about his eligibility when we've heard so much about Shea Patterson and the other Ole Miss transfers and how they've gotten past their NCAA eligibility and will be able to play for their teams? There's a couple of things here I had heard and I'd have to go back and check, but I think all those other guys were in the same class, and maybe a little easier for them to know the fact that Ole Miss was kind of lying to them, or maybe Hugh Freeze was lying to them about the recruitment there. But Van Jefferson, I believe, is a class older than those guys, so that was a potential snag there. Could he use the same excuse or whatever that those guys use? But also, it looks like there was a report from the USA Today that the SEC will be voting on a new rule proposal that will have implications on whether Van Jefferson can be eligible or not coming up. So Florida and Texas A&M both are bringing this proposal that would grant immediate eligibility for transfers within the league if a school has received a postseason ban like Ole Miss. So, for Jefferson, he'd be granted eligibility. If this passes, he'd have to get NCAA clearances as well. Still, it's just not just an SEC rule. He'd still have to get cleared by the NCAA. But, Florida's just trying to make it easier. And, this is kind of a good rule. If a school like Ole Miss has been put on probation and these guys are not able to play in postseason, they will be able to transfer because right now in the SEC, there's so many rules about transfer in conference, and the SEC didn't like that. So there was even if this rule is not passed, maybe they get a waiver for Van Jefferson. We'll kind of see what goes there. But if this rule is passed, it makes it easier for Van Jefferson to get cleared through the SEC, and then him still having to get cleared from the NCAA. So, we'll see. Like I said, Florida and Texas A&M are bringing it up in SEC spring meetings that are next week. So we'll see how that goes. Still have to feel pretty good about this, and it'd definitely be nice to have Van Jefferson. There's 91 catches for 999 yards on the roster. Well, I think we saw how big of a weapon he could be from everything we've heard throughout the spring, what we saw in the open practices. So Van Jefferson, hopefully we'll find out. I doubt we find out next week if he'll be officially eligible or not. But once we hear what the SEC ruling is going to be, if they accept the proposal that Florida and Texas A&M are bringing to the table, I think, if that passes, we would have to think Van Jefferson gets passed by the NCAA as well. So everything I think still looks good, but we'll see where that goes. You never know with the NCAA. So even though all those other guys have been granted eligibility as Ole Miss transfers at their new schools, you still never know what the NCAA is going to do. So wouldn't catch your chickens before they're hatched, but I'd still feel pretty good about Van Jefferson being in a Gator uniform and playing this fall. And as I mentioned, Florida and South Florida agreed to a 3-game series to play in Gainesville in 2022 and 2025, and in Tampa in 2023. We had a quote here from Scott Strickland. This is a unique scheduling opportunity that allows us to get 3 games against a quality FBS opponent, with 2 at home and 1 in a great venue in Tampa. A lot of Gator fans will have the opportunity to attend that game, and we are looking forward to being able to play a regular season game in Central Florida. And Dan Mullen had to say, quote, "We are excited to have the opportunity to host South Florida twice in the Swamp and also play them in Raymond James Stadium. The Tampa-St. Pete area is an important recruiting footprint for us, and our players will love playing another game in an NFL stadium." So you'd have to think, even though there's going to be a home game for USF in 2023, you'd still have to think the crowd's going to be predominantly Gator fans, even though it's a South Florida home game. Much like Miami, when Florida plays in Miami, you're making those schools money because you're selling that stadium out because of your fan base, because of the Florida fan base. So that stadium will be rocking in Tampa in 2023 as a home game for South Florida, but we know Gator fans will probably outnumber there. But here's the thing. I like that it's not a cupcake opponent those years. I'd still would like to see a bigger name opponent. I'd still would like to see Oklahoma or Ohio State or USC, UCLA, somebody different, somebody we don't get to see the Gators play all too often. But as I said, I'm not a big fan of cupcake games. I get their use. I get why they're there. But I still like these big marquee matchups. Last year against Michigan, everybody remembers how exciting that game was. Yeah, it didn't turn out the right way, but it was still an exciting time. Everything going into the offseason leading up to that game was very exciting. We're going to be excited next year when Florida and Miami play in Orlando. That's going to be a fun game to get excited for, especially opening weekend of the season as well. So the cupcakes like this year, look, I'm excited because it's Dan Mullen, and yes, it's Charleston Southern, but we're excited for Dan Mullen. It doesn't really matter who the opponent is, but most years, the cupcake games don't really do much for me there. So wrapping up, glad Blake Alderman could join me here, shed some light on recruiting. I follow recruiting a lot, but I don't know it like Blake does. I don't get to follow it like Blake does. So usually when there's a big recruiting event, I bring Blake on, and he can help shed light on the recruiting world out there. I follow it enough, but the games itself, there's 12 games Florida gets to play in the fall. That's kind of where my wheelhouse is and what I enjoy most about Gators coverage. So hopefully, guys, we'll get to hear some good news about Van Jefferson next week if the SEC passes that rule. Like I said, that's step one. That step gets passed. I think you got to feel pretty good about where Florida stands and Van Jefferson there. Next week, look, preseason magazines are out, guys. The Athlon, the Lindy's, all that good stuff. I'll be kind of, I got my episodes. Wow, look at me. I got my magazines late last week, so I'll be kind of going through those, and I did tweet some stuff out about the All-American teams, the SEC All-American teams from Lindy's and Athlon. Athlon, look, in general, Athlon feels better about Florida than Lindy's does. Athlon's big fans of Dan Mullen. You can see it in a lot of the summaries that they write about Florida. But look, Will and I, Will should be back with me next week. We're really going to break down these preseason magazines and what you can get. My favorite part about those magazines, the anonymous coaches talking about other coaches and there. So I'll share my thoughts on those of like what anonymous coaches think of Dan Mullen and what they think about Florida as well, and breaking down what these magazines really are bringing to the table as far as, do we agree with what they're saying? Do we disagree? and I've already found some interesting numbers in some of those. So definitely, you guys know out there we like numbers, so we'll be breaking down some of Athlon and Lindy's numbers and breaking them down even further. What we do here on Gators Breakdown. So thanks to Blake Alderman one more time. Can't do recruiting coverage without him. Really helps us out here on Gators Breakdown. So guys, we'll catch you next week, and thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.